Welcome back to Can You Come Home? I have mentioned several times that season 1 of Can You Come Home is really dark, really heavy, and centered around a lot of death. And this week's episode is a stark reminder of that reality. 2 weeks ago, I shared with you a story of 2 situations that happened that helped me solidify what my next step was going to be, and that next step was going to be to file for divorce. It is not an overstatement to say I was not doing well. Life felt incredibly hard. Everything was difficult. I was operating at a really bare minimum level of functionality. And then, like I shared last week, there would be these things that would crop up that would just feel like they would knock me over in a way that I didn't have capacity for. And it just continued to make me feel like I was at the bottom of this dark pit, looking up, surrounded on all sides by heavy darkness, and life seemed like a tiny little speck way above my head that I would never return to. This is the context for this week's episode. I received the horrible "Can you come home" phone call on a Friday afternoon in late September. To be exact, it was Friday, September 22nd of the year 2023. On October 28th of 2023, my mother died. If I was teetering on the brink of being able to deal with anything, this knocked me all the way over in a way that just collapsed me in on myself emotionally. It was super dark, super emotional. Layers of grief were being dredged up from a situation that I walked away from 23 years earlier, plus fresh layers of grief from the loss of my marriage, plus just the garden variety hardness of day-to-day life, raising 4 children and being alone. That is not the whole story. So what we're gonna need to do in today's episode in order to tell you the full story is we're gonna have to discuss this timeline. I want you to remember that I got the phone call on a Friday afternoon in late September. Everything that I described in the last 7 to 8 episodes happened between September 22nd and October 28th. I am going to pick the story up next week here at October 28th. What I want to do today is zoom out a little bit, timeline jump just a tad bit forward and a tad bit back so that you can see the full picture that emerged around my mother dying. Several months before that fateful phone call, I knew that my mother was sick. I knew that her condition was worsening. I knew that she was not doing well. And this was before September 22nd. So pre my marriage blowing up, I had an awareness and I knew the facts that my mother was sick, she was not doing well, she was worsening. I made the difficult decision to not go see her. I also made the decision when she died to not attend her funeral. 2 months after her death, so at the end of December 2023, I was in a conversation with some people, and through a serendipitous series of events, I found out that my mother had called my ex-husband and left a message for him prior to her death. I immediately contacted him to find out, did my mother call you and leave a voicemail? And he responded, yes, she did. And I asked, is there a reason that you didn't tell me this? And he said, well, you said you didn't want to hear from them, which is true. I had not had communication with them for a lot of years, but the idea that she had reached out to him and left a voicemail after 23 years of almost no contact seemed like the kind of thing to me that might be worth mentioning. I immediately jumped to the conclusion that she had reached out, he had kept it to himself, and that perhaps there was something on that voicemail that would have changed my decision to both see her before she died and or attend her funeral. I was livid, to put it lightly. This tells you 2 things about me. Number 1, I get angry pretty quickly. It's a very protective emotion, and I know that, but I instantly was engulfed in anger. And second, I was still willing to give her the benefit of the doubt that there was something of hope in the voicemail that she left. So I asked him, do you still have the voicemail? And he said, yes, I have the voicemail. And I said, I need you to send it to me. So he did. When I received the voicemail, it pulled up like a voice memo recording on my phone, and I looked at it, and it had all the metadata attached to it. So the time, the date, the phone number, things like that. And when I looked at the voice message, a very familiar date stuck out to me. She called and left a message for my ex-husband on the morning of the day that he called me to ask me, can you come home? So on Friday, September 22nd, that morning, my mother, who had met him a handful of times in 1999 and the year 2000, had not spoken to or seen him since, called him and left a message that very same morning that he then turned around and called me to say, can you come home, so he could tell me about the events that led to the death of our marriage. My hypothesis, and I have no way of proving this, but my hypothesis is that he received that voicemail from her and thought, I'm going to deliver this awful news. Things will smooth over, and then I will circle back and let her know I received a voicemail from your mother. Or he received the voicemail, he told me the horrible news, and when things did not get smoothed over, he thought, I don't need to mention it. She doesn't know about it. It won't matter anyway. Either way, totally unacceptable in my estimation. So I have this voice memo from my mother 2 months after her death that was left for my ex-husband on the same day that he told me the horrible news about our marriage. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, I need to listen to this. I want to listen to this. I need to know what she said, even if it means that it would have changed the course of action that I took. It's important for me to listen to this. And so I did. I pressed play. I was all by myself and I listened to the voicemail. In this voicemail, her voice is very weepy. She sounds like she's on the verge of tears. She addresses my ex-husband and apologizes to him for the years of hatred that she had for him, asked him to forgive her for her bad behavior in assuming that it was his fault that I left the family, because now she knew full well that that was 100% my decision and I was to blame fully for that decision. She thanked him. She hoped he could forgive her, and she signed off. It was very clear in the voicemail that from her perspective, I was the perpetrator of the wrong in the rift between me and my family of origin. When I heard this voicemail, I had a very similar wash of emotion that I had the day that I heard the horrible news about my marriage. I felt a sense of validation. I won't go so far as to say I felt a sense of relief, although it did feel relief adjacent to know that this voicemail had not held the kind of information that would have changed the course of action that I took as it related to my presence with her at the end of her life. But I did strongly feel a sense of validation at hearing her voice in her words in black and white clearly reach out to him to ask forgiveness while still blaming me for my actions at leaving their family and making me the perpetrator of that harm. It felt very validating to be reminded of the kind of darkness that still existed within my family of origin and how grateful I was to not be living underneath that anymore. On the one hand, she's right. I did choose to leave my family of origin. That is factually correct, but it really misses the entire picture and the premise of the whole thing. In the same way that I was not willing to negotiate the truth inside that counselor's office that I talked about 2 weeks ago, I decided years ago that I was not going to negotiate my position of truth as it relates to why I left my family of origin. I left my family of origin because they gave me an impossible decision. Choose us or choose him. And if you choose him, you will be cut off from us in a way that there will be no relationship. They delivered on their side of that. Anytime there has been any consideration of repairing the relationship with my family of origin, it has always required me to negotiate the foundation of truth from which I operate. I refuse to do that. If their ability to accept me hinges on my calling it anything other than what it was, then we can't have a helpful conversation. In order for there to be growth or movement forward in that relationship, I needed there to be that shared sense of foundation that we are all operating from the same position of truth, which was my lived experience with you was horribly unhealthy. You perpetrated harm on me for a lot of years. Then you presented me with an impossible edict when I wanted to get married. You followed through with your side of that deal to the extent that you were both aggressive and uncompromising in what you considered normal behavior. And here is what is really both reassuring to me and affirming for me as I look back on this situation decades later. Just like all the interactions with my ex-husband after he dropped the bomb were in writing via text or email, every interaction I had with my family of origin was in writing. The amount of primary source material that I have on this would blow your mind. It's not based in memory. It's not based in feeling, although there are a lot of memories and there are a lot of feelings. It's based in black and white, written out truth. And that's how I felt when I listened to my mother's voice on the voicemail she left my ex-husband the morning that he told me the terrible news. I felt a sense of validation, remembering why it was that I could not go see her and why it was that I could not attend her funeral, not out of disrespect for her, but because I didn't want to be in a room with the rest of my family of origin. I did not want to interact with any of them in person. I did not want to have an encounter that would further perpetrate harm on me after years of getting out from under that. The effect that in-person interactions with my family of origin have had on me are so profound that I did not want to allow myself even a chance of enduring that again. The combination of emotion that I felt was really strange. Yes, I felt a sense of validation at protecting myself with good reason, but also it was so strange to know that she had reached out to him to ask for forgiveness in her last days and didn't reach out to me. That she was willing to own her fault with him, someone she had met a couple of times, but wasn't with me. I don't really have words for that. I don't understand it as a mother. I have never understood it as a daughter. It felt like that familiar twinge of darkness that occurred behind closed doors that was really difficult to put into words when I was a child and really difficult to put into words as an adult as it related to my marriage. It pinged that same place of knowing inside of me that like, this is really kind of bizarrely wrong and not just broken, but really strangely wrong. Why didn't you call me? I don't have an answer to that question. I just know that this is the way the story unfolded. That the same day that I received the horrible news about my marriage, that morning my mother had called to leave a voicemail for him in which she asked for his forgiveness that I didn't find out about until 2 months later. And then when hearing it, felt very validated in my decision to not be present at the end of her life. Back to late October when I found out that she had died, but I did not yet know about the voicemail. Her death felt like this final layer of quicksand that engulfed me whole. And pretty quickly, the terrible voices showed up in my head. They were very accusatory. They were very judgmental. It sounded like, look at you. What a disaster. You are so unlovable. No one wants you. Everyone leaves you. You are so easy to leave. No one is ever going to want you. You will always be alone. I have the wherewithal, and I had the wherewithal in the moment to recognize the voices as cruel and full of lies and not coming from a place of health or love. But the reality is I didn't have the strength to fight them off. All the tools that I used to kind of combat those negative patterns of thinking just felt beyond my reach. So I sat mired in these multiple layers of grief and sorrow, the voices in my head doing their worst, and I was sinking. The truth was I was alone. I had my children, but they were my children. And I had friends, but they were friends. I felt very alone because I was very alone. And the layers of loss were tremendous during this time period. I am also highly aware that there are people on the outside of this situation who carried very harsh judgment of my decisions. And I had to bear that as well. It's not my job to convince someone else of my decisions, and I didn't. I felt and knew that I was doing the right thing for me. And in hindsight, with the added layer of that voicemail, I felt very validated in my decision to do so. But at the time, I didn't have the voicemail. I didn't know. Thankfully, for my sake, for your sake, for the sake of everyone involved, this was the worst of it. There's going to be more bad behavior. There's going to be more stings of betrayal. There's going to be more unbelievable plot points. But this is the place of deepest, darkest wounding. And now is when we turn and begin to head towards home.